As everybody knows, carrots don't like manure so much. They say they fork if you put them in manure. I've grown them in manure without them forking, but we don't want people getting on our back. So we just use ordinary soil for the carrot. And the carrots should like this because it's very fine, so they shouldn't have too much trouble spearing their way down.
And I noticed you put a board on here to sieve the soil onto, so it's easy to pick up.
Oh, look, that's a whole other subject which I love talking about, which is gardening technique. Digging a hole. I would love to make a video on digging a hole, because people make it such hard work, and you think digging the hole is something anybody could do. There really is a technique to it, which if you learn it, things are as easy as pie. And one thing about digging is it's always easier to shovel off a board. Look at that. If you're shoveling into a pile, boom, that's easy. But if you're shoveling into a pile of soil, the vibration up your body is immense on your joint. It's easier to pull it down onto a board and then shovel it off a board. But that's a separate video which I would love to make about tools and technique.
Well, let's do it then.
All right. Well,
not this minute.
Huh?
Not this minute.
Not this minute. We're going to do that. Digging holes is something I've been doing since I was 2, so I have plenty of experience.
Brilliant, brilliant. Right, we'll see you later.
All right.
Right, so Dave, tell us about this Rotovator.
Okay, so I'm just pulling out some of the garbage here. This is a very, very small electric Rotovator. I'm not being disparaging, it's almost a toy. But for the home user, I really wouldn't recommend them using a powerful petrol one, because a powerful petrol Rotovator is a beast. And if you don't have experience of using them, they can really run away with you.
Well, this was only 95 quid.
95 quid, and I'm going to show you what it does. And for a home domestic environment, I would say it's fine. One proviso is, remember, it is little more than a toy, but it's still a useful tool, and you mustn't stress it. As long as you don't stress it, you'll get some mileage out of it. If you go crazy with it, you'll burn the motor out. But I'm going to show you what we use it for, which is just to break up the top surface before we plant the potatoes, so that when we mound the soil back on top of the potatoes, it's nice and fine. And the potatoes will do the rest of the work over the season, breaking up the soil. So I'll give you a quick demo. I'll put my ear protection on. Plug him in. I unplugged him.
Why do you go forward? Because then you stand on what you've gone over. Isn't it better to go backwards?
It is theoretically, but you're going against the motor. You could burn the motor out. Yes, you're probably right. But you've got to be, like I say, you have to be careful with the motor on that. If you go backwards, you're pulling against the direction of the motor. You could burn the motor out. I do it when I'm on my own, when nobody's looking. But I thought you might shout at me if you saw me doing that. So look, here we have seed potatoes. These are something called second early, which means we put our first earlies in 2 rows up there about 2 weeks ago, which will give us very nice, sweet, new kind of potatoes. These will give us slightly bigger potatoes, but still thin-skinned a bit like the Cyprus kind of potato. And I remember as a kid loving these for chips. If the chip shop started using second earlies, you knew, because they were so sweet that you could really taste the difference. But an interesting point is something that you mentioned the other day, David. Yeah, on a seed potato like this, you have eyes. Where you find one that you can cut, so this one, we have eyes here, we have an eye here. If we cut that in the middle there, we actually have two that we can use. And you mentioned that you believe if we have a smaller, cut two halves like that, they'll produce bigger potatoes. Well, that's going to be interesting because this row we're going to do now are all going to be cuts.
Now, those YouTube videos that you refer to as gardening porn say that when you cut them, they should be they should either be left to heal for a week or so to make a hard surface where you've cut it, or one should put something on them to seal them.
Right, well, I'll show you what the old boys used to do.
So this is old boy wisdom.
Old boy wisdom. They wouldn't bother with that. They wouldn't have the time for that. So we've got eyes here and we've got eyes here. So I'm going to cut it there. We now have two seed potatoes which are viable. But the old boys, they would just make some mud with the soil and do that, and then put them in the ground. So your YouTube people are saying you need to leave them for a week, which I'm not disputing. Yeah, maybe, you know, you could do that. But I know the old gardeners, a guy I used to work with like 30 years ago, that's what they used to do. They'd muddy them up in some kind of clay and then put them in the ground. So that's about dividing seed potato. Now the actual planting, we're looking for about 4 inches of coverage. So our last line was here. I'm aiming to get my potato in about here, about 15 inches away. So I'll just pull a little, that's like that one, about 12 inches apart, 2.
So you're pouring water into each of those holes you've just
done.
done.
I'm going to let that water sink. I'll get some more water. Hang on. So we'll mark this row with a stick to mark it, because these are cuts, the other two are not cuts, and it would be interesting to see the comparison between the yield between cuts and non-cuts. So I'm just looking for about 4 inches of coverage on these. I just take my Spanish hoe. This is a tool I'd recommend anybody, because instead of digging with your back, you're just using your arms and shoulders. So I've got no strain on my back when I'm doing this. And then I'll go this way. So when that's all settled down, each potato, because that will sink down a lot, each potato should have about 4 inches coverage. The real professional touch This is only for experts. It's the old broom trick.
Brilliant.
It's
So we'll see what they do.
10 to 12 weeks, yeah, 12 weeks, maybe 12 weeks on these. So already these first earlies here are coming up. Look, we planted these 2 weeks ago. These
Oh,
are
yes.
First earlies. They need a good drink actually. We haven't had a lot of rain. But,
And I see over there you've put a white canvas over the side of the greenhouse to stop
Yeah,
the
it's
salad
shading.
burning.
We've had to shade it in there, which is standard greenhouse procedure anyway. On a good greenhouse, you'll have shading. The sun, you know, it's your friend in February, March. Come April, it's getting a bit strong. So now we're trying to fight the sun as well now.
So should we plant that grapevine that's wanting to bust out all over?
Well, if you say yes,
Well, it might be an idea on
do
the
you-
outside.
Where do you want it?
Well, we can put it on the outside there, can't
Here?
we? Yes,
Right. Yeah, I love it here. Plenty of sun.
yes.
In fact, I think this whole, you know, 3/4 of a yard in front of this, you've got a nice bed, which if we clean it out, put the roof tile edging, be a great growing environment. You know, in the first video we made, I think it was the first video, we were talking about the reason we took the soil, the grass off the top, and I mentioned a pest called wireworms, and I've just found 2 over there. Unfortunately, you weren't here. I killed them. I broke them into 2, but there's definitely some.
You murderer!
Huh?
You
Sorry.
murderer!
Sorry. I don't think there's many, but another advantage about turning the soil over with the rotovator like this is it will expose them, give the birds a chance to get them, or I catch them. But they're over here somewhere. But there's not many. But it is an issue. Wireworms and cottonworms.
So it's an important thing to,
If you've got
Deal
the
with.
energy, yes, you're improving your chances.
or just the tool.
Or just the what?
Or just the tool.
Or just the tool.
It's all about having the right tools.
About having the right tools, yes. If you haven't got the tools, it would be very hard to do this. You'd have to take your chance, I think. But, you know, that's what the farmers used to do, the settlers. They'd have a horse and a plough, an ox and a plough. They'd plough that, turn the ground over, drop a potato in.
Why, they suffered famine.
And then sometimes they suffered famine, exactly. Yeah, it's about cutting the odds down, isn't it? I mean, we may lose some potatoes to wireworm. We'll see.